The Rolling Stones couldn't get any satisfaction. And the Beatles called out for help. The minister was born, and the gasoline was 31 cents per gallon. President Lyndon Johnson signed Medicare to be a law. And Dr. Poolos joined our medical staff at Fairview. The year was 1965. We are so fortunate that out of all the places in the world, out of all the hospitals in the world, you chose us to practice at Fairview Hospital. And we sincerely appreciate that decision. It gives me great pleasure to be able to introduce my colleague, my previous teacher, my surgeon, and a family friend, and to be able to present with him with this Lifetime Achievement Award in recognition for his all the years of dedicated work at Fairview Hospital, as well as for the Department of Surgery. Okay, his early schooling days, they were kind of boring. Especially when you skip a grade because of the high scores, it has been boring. Until one day, his headmaster gave him a medal. And while giving the medal, he said, how come a foreigner's son is getting a medal in American history? Dr. Poolos graduated from the Medical College of Georgia, then completed his rotating internship at Mount Sinai, and did 1 year of general surgery residency at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta before finishing his neurosurgery residency at Case West, Missouri. Following his completion of residency, he served 2 years as a staff at the United States Naval Hospital in San Diego. In September 1965, he decided to come back to Fairview and join his partner, the famous Dr. James Gardner. Dr. Poolos is currently the longest serving section chief of neurosurgery section, a position that he has held since 1974. He also served in the Faculty of General Surgery residency program. He has been a member of the Surgical Council and Fairview Hospital Medical Executive Committee. He has had academic appointment in the Clinical Assistant Professor in Neurosurgery at Case Western Reserve University. Additionally, he has remained active in the community where he has been a member of various boards, including the Hellenic College and Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology. His favorite interest in sport is baseball, coming from a family where one of his uncles played for Cleveland Indians. Many of you don't know that. But his one of the major contributions to the Department of Surgery is conducting the annual Christmas party. And that party has always been the most successful, most fun-filled party. There is a reason behind it which most people didn't know, that he always used to sneak some vodka into the punch bowl. Dr. Poolos has a very strong commitment to the practice of neurosurgery, compassion for the patients he cared for, and loyalty and dedication to the community as well as to the Fairview Hospital. He always has a positive outlook and always cared for his family and those who depended on him. He is devoted to his family to his wife Priscilla. They recently celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary a couple of years ago. And on a personal note, my wife and me and Joe and Kelly, we are very honored and flattered to be a part of that celebration. If you don't mind, let's congratulate again Dr. Poolos and Priscilla for achieving this great milestone in their marriage. He is also blessed with his son Nick, who flew in for this purpose, but daughter-in-law Harriet, she couldn't make it, and Mark and daughter Alexandra, and of course his grandchildren. Please join me in recognizing Dr. P. Poolos with the 2013 Fairview Hospital Lifetime Achievement Award.
Two words best describe my journey from Atlanta, Georgia to Cleveland, Ohio. Epiphany, serendipity. I was 14 years old, going to Atlanta Public Schools, just turned 14. Went home, the classes then were about 30 or 40. I was learning nothing, and I talked to my mother, and I said, I'm really learning nothing in school. Could I try going to summer school? And I saw a school bus traveling through my neighborhood, and it had young men dressed in military uniform. And the bus said Georgia Military Academy. It was the only private school in Atlanta. And she said, sure. So we got on a streetcar, got on a bus, and went across town. And I enrolled in summer school. Can you imagine a weird kid wanting to go to summer school? Well, my father had a restaurant at the time, and I got out of going working in the restaurant. So I joined and went to summer school, and I held my own. And I went to that military school and graduated with honors from high school when the head man made the harumping quotation that Dr. Raj mentioned about a foreigner's kid earning the American History Medal. Well, serendipity, I walked through the staff office and there was an announcement on the bulletin board. They needed a bus driver. And I went to apply for the job. I was 17 at the time, just turned 17. Can you drive a truck transmission, 4 on the floor, non-synchro mesh transmission? I don't know if anybody here knows what that means. It means that you had to time the engine speed with the gear you're going to put under gear. I said, sure. I had to go learn quickly to get a chauffeur's license. And I drove a school bus for 1 year for free tuition. So I was set. I clashed the gears a few times. But the next summer, I had to go to military camp. I was learning to be a second lieutenant in the United States Army. And that's the Korean War came along. And second lieutenants were cannon fodder. died on the front line and a lot of second lieutenants. I think the mortality rate was 50% in that war. So I come back to campus. I had my school bus drive a job again for the second year of junior college. And I talked to a classmate from high school who had gone to a real university. I said, hey, what's it like up there? And he starts explaining to me what it's like, especially co-eds. Epiphany. I don't belong in this junior college. So I go to the registrar's office and I get my grades, which were quite good. And I called Emory University and I made an appointment and they agreed to accept me. They took my semester grade and gave me a credit for a quarter. And I decided at that moment, after walking through Emory University Hospital corridor, that I wanted to become a doctor. I had no idea before that moment. So I took all pre-med. Every afternoon I had labs. I was walking through the hospital again, and on the bulletin board, there was an announcement. They were looking for a ward secretary. So I applied for the job, and I got a job as a ward secretary. The salary I made paid my tuition for college. I slept at home. My parents fed me. I was happy. As they used to say in the South, I was happy as a pig in shit. Get up in the morning at 7 o'clock. I met a friend who was going to Emory. He had a car. I'd walk a mile and a half to his place. He was always late. I'd knock on the door. We'd jump in his car, drive to Emory. Classes started at 8:05. I went to class. We'd go to the gym, play a little handball, take a shower, have a sandwich. I'd go to lab. Labs were 2 to 5. I'd go to the alumni building, have a sandwich, listen to a record, usually Dvorak's New World Symphony. I'd start my job at 6, get out of my job at 10, catch the bus, go home. My mother would give me something to eat. I'd study for about an hour. I'd get in the bathtub. The bathtub was about this long. So I'd sit in the tub, warm water with my knees propped up, book on my knees. Around 1:30, I'd fall asleep. I didn't drown because the tub was too small. Around 3 o'clock, I'd wake up because the water got cold. I'd get up, get in bed, go to sleep, wake up at 7. Start all over again. That movie, Groundhog Day. That was my career. So, the tough course was organic chemistry. That was the killer. But I could never make Professor Lester's organic chemistry review. So I made a C in organic chemistry. So I go for my interview to try to get into medical school after my 3rd year. And at Emory, I sat in a room with 3 other guys trying to get into medical school. And after a 10-minute interview, I was turned down. So I'm walking down the hallway, and a guy tells me, you know, there's another medical school in Georgia. It's a very old medical school, very highly regarded, called Medical College of Georgia. Why don't you call them? I called. They were still accepting applicants. So I called them. I drove down there. I had to stay a day and a half. I spoke to 4 different doctors, psychiatrists, Dr. Cleckley, who wrote the book about the 3 Faces of Eve, very well known, very kind man. My last interview was with the registrar. She said, why don't you go back to college? Get your degree. You know, get some nice courses, English literature, world history. I said, I don't have that kind of time. I don't have that kind of money. And they accepted me. I bare my soul to all of you, I don't have a college degree. Sorry. So it took me into medical school. A most wonderful, wonderful experience. They treated us like human beings from day one. And it was wonderful. In my third year, I was elected to the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. Boy, was that a position of power. I had a faculty advisor who was very well known in gynecological areas, Professor Khalif Greenblatt. He paid no attention to what I wrote in that paper. Let me tell you, I wrote some scandalous stuff that now I ought to put in jail now. So I'm ready to go and apply for an internship. I did not want to stay in the South. I didn't like the racial atmosphere of the South. My father, my mother, medical school, I never heard the N word. I never heard a person with black skin treated badly. And I didn't want to stay down there. So I applied, and I was going to get an interview, University of Chicago Clinics. Getting ready to mail in my application, a phone call comes from my home, and my father had a massive upper GI hemorrhage. His big shot doctor from Emory University was treating him like he's just an ignorant old immigrant. He was calling him up, and he was treating him with some tranquilizer or something. And then the doctor calls him and says, "Your father hasn't got long to live. He's got a cancer of the stomach." So I tore up the Chicago paper, took an internship in Atlanta in some crummy private hospital, went to Atlanta. My father had a 5-hour surgery. It was a big ulcer. It burned through his stomach into his pancreas. The poor man must have suffered, and he never complained. So now I'm stuck with an internship in a place I didn't want to be. My Jewish roommate at medical school said, "Hey, there's a hospital that I'm going to in Cleveland named Mount Sinai. They have one opening. It's not Atlanta." So I called them. They said, "If you can get out of the other one, we'll take you." And they took me. And I drove up and crossed that Carnegie Bridge, and the smoke was belching out of those steel mills. And I said, "Man, this is a city." So I drive into the hospital, and I go to meet the administrator, and I get my room assignment. You talk about luck. I'm assigned a room in the nurses' dormitory building. I'm on the second floor. The ground floor was the main entrance on 105th Street. There's a little room that had a newspaper. Across from me was the house mother, Mrs. Tishek. Of course, I got to know Mrs. Tishek. There was a lounge room that had a record player. And on the Saturday evenings, when all the boyfriends would come with the little darlings, and they'd stand by the elevator, and I'd stand by the elevator, and they would be whispering sweet nothings to their ears, and I'm looking at them, and they're saying goodbye, and they're looking at me, who's he saying goodbye to? And the girls would get on the elevator, and I'd get on last, and as the door was closing, I'd wave to the guy. I'll take good care of the darlings. So I'm sitting there one day in the lounge on September, and one of the nurses, older nurses in the emergency room, Miss Wertschafter, said, "Hey, there's an Orthodox girl coming into class." I said, "Okay." Not Jewish Orthodox now. So I'm sitting in the lounge reading the paper, and Miss Tishek is over there at her desk, and I see this little flouncy girl bouncing down with the skirt and the little saddle shoes, and great legs, and the ponytail, and she's going there and she's buying a stamp. And she comes back by, and about 5 minutes later, she comes down again. And I hear she's buying another stamp. So I'm reading the paper. She comes down a third time. And I hear her buying another stamp, and she's coming back toward me. And I said, hey, little lady, y'all gonna buy any more of them stamps? She looks at me and she runs over to me. She snatches that paper out of my hands. She grabs my head. She gives me a big kiss. And she says, hey, big boy, I'm going to marry you, and I'm going to have 3 kids with you. Whoa, now, whoa. I said, just a minute here, man. My mama ain't going to go for this. My mama done warned me about you dainty women. And she ain't going to go. She says, I'll take care of your mama, don't worry. So it just so happened that I had to make rounds with the neurosurgeon at Mount Sinai. He was a little short, kind of a feisty guy, very nice guy. He was a monster in the operating room. This guy would jump up and down and scream, and the residents hated it. So when he'd come into the emergency room and call up and say, I'm making rounds, they'd say, Poolos, you go with that guy. So I would go with him. And he liked me. He would call me when I wasn't on service. One January night, he calls me, he says, would you come and help me? It was midnight. I've got a little kid, and he's got a brain abscess. I said, sure. So we operate on him, and I'm helping him. And we finished the case, and we're sitting there. And he said, well, what are you going to do with yourself? I said, well, I'm going to go into OBGYN. We had a strong OBGYN department in medical school. I actually had a job as a senior medical student, as an extern, delivering primary women who were on charity. He said, nah, you don't want to go into that. You have the talent to be a neurosurgeon, and I'm going to call the big professor over at Western Reserve, because he was on the teaching staff there, and I got an appointment. They only took 1 resident a year over there with Frank Nelson, and that's how I got my start in neurosurgery in Case Western. Well, it wasn't Case Western then. Western Reserve University with Frank Nelson. And that was 4 hard years, but Frank Nelson was a gentleman. He never opened his voice to a resident. He never criticized him. He never wanted to get a written letter from Frank Nelson. I got one because I was late going to conference down at Metro, and he wrote me this letter. I'm very disappointed you're coming to conference late. Man, I never was late after that. Then he wanted me to join the faculty. He wanted me to be a junior. He wanted me to get a 5-year research grant. I said, Dr. Nelson, I don't have that much experience. Never mind, we're going to send the papers in. He wanted me to go to Washington to deal with Dr. Axelrod, who was just doing some neurochemistry. I said, the Navy saved me, because I didn't want to be a faculty with Frank Nelson, because he would be forever a resident. So I go to the Navy. Wonderful experience in San Diego. I get a lot of letters and calls. People, some guy from Cleveland sends me a check. He wants me to join him in practice, St. Luke's in Charity. And I go there, and I call my boss. I said, what do you think of this guy? He's good, you know, blah, blah, blah. So we have a handshake agreement. I'm going to join him when I get out of the Navy. Fine, it's all set. So I go back. I've got my future set. I can come back to Cleveland where I wanted to come. I didn't want to go anyplace else. And in April of that year, I say to Priscilla, let's go to the big national meeting in New York City. The Navy had a policy. You can go to a professional meeting, you get travel time, meeting time, and it's not counted as vacation time. So I said, I want to go to New York City. I'm driving. 6 days there, 6 days back, 4 days at the meeting. I got a lot of vacation time. So we drive there, and the minute I get to the meeting, I'm being paged. Somebody is paging me from Cleveland. A guy named Herb Bell. I didn't know who Herb Bell was. And he meets me, and we have a drink, and he says, hey, the word is out that you're coming back to Cleveland. I said, yeah. He said, listen, we're very interested in you joining us. And I said, who's we? He said, Dr. Gardner. Well, Dr. Gardner was known as Mr. Neurosurgeon in the Midwest, known internationally, and he had to leave the clinic because he was 65. And two of his ex-residents brought him into their practice, and he was the chief man of the practice. I said, well, I'm sorry, but I already have an agreement with this guy. He said, you got a written contract? I said, no, but I have to honor my agreement. Okay, fine. I come back, I go back to the Navy, I finish my tour duty, I come back to Cleveland, I get a suit with my separation pay, I go to the guy's office, I sit down, I'm ready to start working, doctor. I can't hire you. What? No, I can't hire you. I'll let you take all my emergency call at St. Luke's and Charity, the night of the gun clubs then, and I'll let you rent from me, you know, and I'll just put it on the books and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, this guy's been cooking this story up for a long time. So I said, thank you, doctor, but I think I could do that on my own. So I walk out of there, go down to the lobby of the Hannah building, and I got no job. My furniture's in San Diego. My kid and my wife were in Akron in a little apartment with my mother-in-law. And I'm thinking, and I look in the phone book. Herb Bell's office is in the Hannah building. I call up her. I said, you guys still looking for a partner? Yeah. You available? Yeah. I go up there. There's Dr. Gardner. I don't know if anybody in this room has ever met Dr. Gardner. He's about this tall. Little mustache. One of the most wonderful human beings. A terrific surgeon, an innovator. He made more advancements in neurosurgery. He wrote a book when he was in his mid-70s, and I helped him put together all the illustrations called the dystrophic states. Just a great guy. And they said, well, how much do you want? I said, $18,000 the first year. Fine. Every year I get $5,000 in advance. Fine. So the Irishman the Irishman that started the group takes me out to the head secretary. He says, cut a check for Dr. Poolos, $1,500. Holy moly, $1,500 in one check? And that's how I started. Dr. Gardner took me to Fairview Hospital. That's the first time I walked into Fairview Hospital with Dr. Gardner, 1965. Lean was the guy that I was going to work with. He was out of town. He was running all over Hell's Half Acre. He was going to the east side. He was going to Parma, all over the place. And after I'd been in with him 1 year, I said to him, listen, let's cut out these places. The place to go is Fairview. There's the future. And I saw right at the beginning that these residents, most of them were foreign residents, were not being taught anything. They weren't learning anything. They were being used to fill in blanks. Blanks, to satisfy the hospital association. So I started making rounds with them. I started doing x-ray rounds. I started doing arteriogram rounds. I did all the diagnostic studies there. I did all the arteriograms. When CAT scans came, we did CAT scan rounds. We did whodunit rounds. I made them stand up and learn how to present cases. We had a pathology lab in the back. We did dissections of median nerves, carpal tunnels. I had the pathologists do brain cutting sessions with them. I wanted these young men to learn how to examine patients, even up until the time that the general surgery program kicked us out. They didn't kick us out. They told us we weren't important anymore for the program. The residents were working too hard, so we were told, urology and I were told, we don't have room for you guys. My career, I couldn't ask, if if I were given the Nobel Prize, it wouldn't mean as much to me as walking down the hallway of Fairview Hospital and having an x-ray technician come up to me and shake my hand or pat me on the back and smile at me. Or somebody in the housekeeping department greeting me to say hello. Or some long forgotten patient coming down the hallway saying, hey, you operated on me. Hey, you took care of my kid who had a terrible brain tumor. Or going to some grocery store and somebody saying, you took care of me. You took care of my wife. And them smiling. Nothing can surpass that feeling that you touched somebody's life and they remembered you. That means so much to me. And what means so much more to me is having people like you. And I'm not just talking about you doctors, male and female. I'm talking about you Dr. Humans, because you doctors had to perform the way you perform because of your family supporting you. It's not easy being the husband or the wife of a doctor, because they can be damn monsters. My son, my oldest son, Nick, was 6 or 7 years old, and we were taking call at Parma Hospital. And they had no help down there. It was a miserable place to work. And as soon as my partner came back from out of town, we quit. But I was on call Sunday, sitting there having lunch. And they called me. We have a patient in the emergency room. They had nobody. I had to go down there to examine, write the orders, everything. It was a nothing. It was some kid who hit the head. They all vomit, you know. So I drive all the way down there. It's a long drive. Parma's in the middle of hell. You don't know where it is. When you come back from hell, you finally come back to civilization. I'm sitting there finishing my meal. My son is there. He was always the calmest of the group. Nothing worked him over. In fact, when we were driving from San Diego to Akron, he was 2 years old, 2.5 years old. We had a little potty chair for him. He never said a word. He never complained. He never griped. I want this, I want that. You know, it's just that tight. So he's sitting there eating his lunch, and the phone rings. I sat down to eat, and the phone rings. Parma Hospital. Dr. Poolos, we're so sorry. We forgot to tell you there was another patient in the next room, and we forgot to tell you. I broke the phone, and that's back when phones were made of something tough. So my son says to my wife as I go storming out, boy, Dad is strong. So living with a physician is not easy. But we try to keep our cool. We try to stay calm. It's very important for a surgeon to be that way. You can't raise your voice in the operating room. You can't show your insecurity. But the thanks that you get from colleagues and patients and cleaning ladies and repairmen and all these people that make a hospital go. And of course you too, Jan. I thank you all. I can't tell you what this means to me, and to have you all come here for all of us. I thank you again.